Yeah, buddy. Matt here with Angry American Dads, and I'm joined by the other half of this podcast, Gaetano. We don't have him on camera, but we got his audio. So, you there, big guy?
I am. Good to
Perfect.
see you, brother.
Good to see you too, man. Well, kind of.
Good to hear my melodious voice.
There we go. There we
There
go.
we go. Nice.
Well, we did our previous podcast delved into mental health and how it's leading to some of the violence that we're seeing and everything else in the world. But you brought up a very good point. We need to delve into some of the issues we've had and how we've dealt with it and the different things that and how that's contributed to what we've accomplished and what we've worked through and what we've overcome. Did I miss anything with that?
Yeah, that's how, like last week we talked. We kind of narrowed it down that a big chunk of the crisis right now is men not being able to be men and not really knowing what to do about it. And it got me thinking as to when did I particularly come to that realization, and what did I, there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I talked to you just before we got on there. What do you think some of the lies or mistruths we were told as boys, not, and I think it's not just us, but how our parents were misled, to point us in certain directions. At least I know in my life, I had some people point us in certain directions that weren't necessarily the best for what to become the men we can be. And I was just interested to know whether, certain things in your life where people told you to do certain things like go to school, get a good job, things like that. How did that pan out, and how has that affected you and turned your life around, things like that?
I guess with something like that to start it off, I guess I would say you want to break it down into along those lines. Yeah, get a job, live the quote unquote the American dream, so to speak. That's pretty much what I've done. And I'm not going to say that that was a bad idea. I would say that right now, considering everything, I'm in a very good spot. I'm a very lucky man. I mean, you can see my life, so it's one of those that you know we live fairly good spot. I have my parents are in good health. My wife and I have an amazing, beautiful, wonderful wife. I have two kids. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's happy. It's I'd say we're doing pretty damn good, and I'm extremely lucky. Don't get me wrong. I guess the thing for me is, and it wasn't so much my parents that did this stuff. It was more society. And I guess what I would say is, especially through school, stuff like that. And it's only gotten worse that what they're doing is they're chipping away at the differences between men and women. And instead of sitting there and say, okay, yes, men and women are different. We need to feed your guys' strengths and build your weaknesses kind of deal. And you have to do each one a little differently just because you are different. They try to lump you into this single category, and they do it in a way that totally strips away any masculinity or makes it impossible to build upon that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So where did, like, you started? You and I had talked about it before, but you went up to Alaska for forestry first.
I first, when I went to college to start off with, I went and I got my liberal arts degree because I knew I needed to knock out like the first 2 years, get the basics out of the way. And I went up to University of Alaska Fairbanks to go for natural resources management. So you were dealing with forestry, you were dealing with biology, you were dealing with a bunch of different things. And that was because the main thought for a lot of people, and if you looked at most of my friends that went to school at the time, and maybe, I mean, you can chime in on this too. I'm not sure if, and I would say after the conversations we've talked, you were in a lot of the same boat was, hey, work with your head, not your back. Don't go
Always.
into the
Yep.
trades, use your head, sit behind a desk because that's where the big money was. And everybody said that's what you need to do. You need to make money. You need to have a good retirement, your 401k, all that happy stuff.
Hmm.
And you can live the American dream. Everything's going to be wonderful. I've always had, and I think, and you're going to have to delve into yours here in a little bit, but it's like I've always had, it seems like a penchant for always wanting to do something with some physicality to it. There has to be something to test yourself physically. Prior to, I mean, I left college right in the middle of getting my degree up there because I got offered this law enforcement job back home and I came back. But I literally, I mean, you got to think about it. That summer, I had it already lined up to go work a forestry job fighting fires. And I was getting looked at like I started the process. And there was a helo crew. They fought fires by going in by helicopter. They didn't jump. They just, helicopter would go and set you down and you work from there instead of being one of the crews that worked off of trucks off of roadways. And it took a little more to get into the helo crews, and then again, it takes a lot more to get on to like your smoke jumpers and stuff like that. Those guys are all crazy. But the helo crew, the thing that worked to my point is I was still in the Army Reserve at that time, so I had that background a little bit and everything else. So they were willing to look at me, and I could pass a physical fitness test without an issue. And I was also a little bit older than the average age of most of the guys in college at that point. And but I mean, just that. I mean, it's a very physically
Very
demanding
physical.
job.
Yep.
It's a dangerous job to a certain extent, but at that age and everything else, and even now looking back at it, I mean, we're talking 20 something years ago, I'm going, man, that still would have been freaking
That would
cool.
have been cool. Yeah. Yep.
But no matter what I did, there always had to be some sort of physicality behind it. And that was the internal battle I was fighting between, okay, here's my education, but I still want to be freaking testing myself physically all the time.
Sure.
So my issue I had with school was sitting there and trying to keep it contained and focus on my studies and being, at the same time, you're in college, your freaking hormones are through the roof. And at the same time, you're looking around at all the pretty girls walking around and you're just like, okay,
Just a
this
bit
is easily
distracted.
distracted.
Yeah. Just a bit distracted for sure.
Um, but that was my experience up to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So like you hit the nail on the head there, I think, with, some of the issues that we're having, right? So the lack of physicality in some of these jobs. And that's kind of part of what I wanted to dive into is some, I think over the years, you and I have had several revelations in our life. And I was just trying to get to a part where, when was my first revelation that, the, the American dream, so to speak, was sold to us, right? So my parents, my parents and I went to, the local private school, and we were told, just get good grades, get a good job, go to college, get a good job, you'll be fine. But when I got out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my parents, we had a construction company up until then, and my father had cured me of the desire to do any manual labor since I was a freshman in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of these guys where I have the ability to do a lot of the trades. I just don't want to. I don't. I've been doing them for so long. Where you, on the other hand, you're a pretty physical guy. You're very physically active, and in some of those respects, we're a little bit opposite because I had to learn to get that physicality back because I found that in college that lack of physicality led to just negative thoughts. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're the only when you're not moving and all you have is your thoughts, it seems to me that a lot of the negative thinking can seep into your brain. Whereas if you are that physical, like high school wasn't bad because I was playing sports. When I went to college, I got hurt, so I couldn't play sports. And then you're in college and you tell everybody you're studying, but you're not really studying. You're doing other extracurricular activities that don't involve a lot of physical stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think I think you hit it on the head. Your physicality has led to a lot of your success because I've noticed whenever you get frustrated or pissed off, you just go out and work, and it seems to be very cathartic for you. How do you what is your thought process, or what happens? When you get pissed off, when what is your level of give a shit get to a point where you're just like, I got to go move something because I got to stop thinking.
Well, without going into a serious ton of background, it's one of those that from a very young age, it's one of those things that I figured out due to certain circumstances. I figured out that if I let my anger level get to a certain point, my reactions after that were just not healthy at all for anyone within reach of me. It's just, it wasn't a good thing. No matter what I had tried to do at young age, and I will give my parents everything under the sun. They tried everything to freaking kind of contain it, so to speak, but they didn't understand it. And I'll be honest, anytime I've ever talked to somebody like a therapist or a psychologist or anything like that, anyone that I was exposed to in our area, none of them had a freaking clue. And
I would
looking,
love to be in that room with you and a therapist. That would be entertainment right there.
yeah, it could get entertaining. It's one of those that I guess my thing was that was looking back at it. Of course, hindsight's 2020, and I think my parents would agree that at that point, the best thing for me would have been like you did a short a little while ago about teaching your son aggression and how to control it and when to use it and everything else. That's what I needed. At that point would have been the perfect point to get me into heavy duty martial arts, get me into that stuff at that age. That would have been perfect because it would have been that, hey, this is how you learn to control this and do this. Because it wasn't until a little bit later, there was two things that really kicked off later in my life. After when I went to basic training, I had a moment, and I will never forget this as long as I live. I had a drill sergeant there that he would, and I mean, drill sergeants have the ability, a lot of them have the ability to turn it on and off, and they're really good at it. But he would get to a point, and if he was having a bad day, and especially if he felt it was a personal affront to him, he literally would have a meltdown. And the closest thing I can equate it to is a toddler throwing a temper tantrum.
With power.
I fully expected him to sit down on his butt, start stomping his feet and slamming his fists into the ground because it was, that was the next step. That was the only logical next step for him to go. Yeah. And I remember sitting there and watching that one day. Day goes by. We go get in our racks. I had the top bunk, and I'm laying there staring at the ceiling tiles. I close my eyes, and I'm just about asleep. My eyes slammed open, and I went, holy shit, that's me. I don't know what triggered it. I don't know what it was, but that was a moment where I'm like, I literally, when I start to get angry, I throw a temper tantrum. I went, oh, okay, I need to reevaluate.
And how old are you at this point?
21.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, it hit me late.
Wow. You and I both know people that ain't hit yet.
Oh, trust me, I know. I know people in their 30s and 40s that haven't hit it.
Yeah.
And the only way I can equate it is after that, I remember doing everything through basic and AIT and everything else, but it was almost like I was in a little bit of a haze. And I was just constantly thinking about myself and all the things that I'd done.
Yeah.
But it was shortly after that when I came back and I got in, went to Alaska, came back, got in with law enforcement, and shortly after that, and I started in Alaska doing martial arts, doing jits and everything else, and that was fine. It really didn't hit me until I came back, and prior to you and I starting training and everything else, I started going to this boxing gym. And I'll never forget it. Did a lot of bag work, did a bunch of other stuff. And one day they wanted to put me in the ring with this new kid. And I watched him. The kid spazzes out hard. And I remember going in and I totally misread what was coming. And he punched me square in the face. And I'm pretty sure he broke my nose. But I remember how bad it hurt. And then literally all the pain went away and everything I got super angry, but everything got super focused. And then I proceeded to just obliterate this kid. And I remember the instructor looks at me and goes, where the hell's that been all this time? You were just so focused. And I'm like, I don't know.
Yep.
And that's when I started realizing, like you were saying with me, it's like I will sit there and once I get to a certain point, I'm like, I can almost funnel it and say, okay, I need to shut everything else out, put blinders on, block my ears, everything, and just pick something I need to do. And that's when I can focus every bit of energy on what I'm doing. And then you work yourself to the point that you're just exhausted. And then all of a sudden it's almost like a connection, mind-body connection where all of a sudden you're going, okay, I can reset here. And that's why it's become so important over those years. I mean, think about it. Think about all the times that you and I would get together with training and I'd say, dude, I've had the shittiest week. And I'd look at you, and those were the days I'd be like, let's spar.
Oh yeah.
And you would smack the snot out of me.
Jeez.
But the thing is, it's like,
After a while, dude, it didn't start out that way.
but the thing was, it's like, you, everybody would joke about it, but that honestly was therapy.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm getting at here. I think you and I talk about what helped us and what we needed, and I think you're completely right. I think we have both arrived at the same conclusion, but we started at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was not the energetic kid. My mother still tells me to this day that my sister got most of the empathy in the family. It's just nothing phased me as a kid. And then I went to high school, or I went to college, and through some things happened in college, and I hit a pretty low point, and I can remember feeling physically ill like
Mm-hmm.
all
Yep.
the time, just feeling like I wanted to puke all the time after a couple things happened, and then I started to notice when your baseline becomes physically ill all the time, and you start to notice sometimes when that goes away, and I started exploring things, and I can understand. It wasn't until that point I could never understand why people get hooked on drugs. But if you're at such a low point all the time, you're reaching for something higher, and you take, some people take that avenue of drugs, some people take that avenue of physicality, like you're taking,
Mm-hmm.
or like you took. So I just started noticing that when I watched a movie, I didn't feel sick. As soon as the movie was over, I'd start to want to puke again.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started to notice, I went to the gym, started lifting weights, started doing powerlifting, things like that. When I went to the gym, didn't feel sick. Came out of the gym, feel sick again. So I just started to explore and read different books on, the separation of, how to separate your feelings from your thoughts. And you and I dove into that a little bit, on the last podcast. But I think, it led me, it led to a climax when I was in college and I was bouncing. I bounced for like 6 years, but there was one night where I just got the shit beat out of me, just like just like you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody sucker punch me. My head bounced off the concrete. I was out. I don't remember anything till the next day. And I can't. And it was kind of like your revelation, right? It wasn't. I wasn't in the army. I just had the crap kicked out of me, and I kind of had a flashback of everything I ever done in my life, and how it was like a show. Like, I was a bigger dude. Nobody really ever messed with me. All the other fights that I've been in have been me getting in and stopping the fight, taking a couple hits, giving a couple hits. Never me being the actual target.
Mm-hmm.
When I was the actual target, I got wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
So that led me to Nate. In a roundabout
Mm-hmm.
way, I met Nate, and Nate really knew how to fight, and he taught me how to fight. But the first few sparring matches, I think you would have laughed your ass off, because he popped me in the face one time, and I thought, what the hell was that? I didn't even know where he was,
Yeah.
you know,
I know
but I
that
can
feeling.
remember, yeah, yeah. But I can remember, just like you're saying, after that, my mind was clear, and I started noticing whenever, things got foggy, whenever things got depressing, whenever I felt that want to puke feeling, which as a business owner happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
I either need to do something physical, and not just, it's not just go for a walk.
Mm-mm.
It's go and put yourself in a situation of, you're working yourself until you're exhausted, or boxing, jiu-jitsu, something like that, where you can't help but focus yourself, or there's going to be some real heavy
Mm-hmm.
consequences.
Yeah.
So I think that to me was one of the first revelations, and it sounds like, it was a revelation to you as well. It's just, to clear your head and get the shit out of it. But again,
100%.
same thing. It was all my own doing. Everything that I went through to hit that low point was my own doing, my own choices, which was another revelation. So,
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and then it leads into what do you do to maintain that calm?
right, right,
And I know for myself, it's one of those that's where I figured it out pretty quick because I had my biggest revelation for that came from we just built our house and I had some workout equipment and I was working out 3, 4 times a week. And then for whatever reason, I started working out pretty much every day. And all of a sudden I noticed it's like, man, if I take like 2 or 3 days off,
You feel it.
oh, and it's literally the first place I feel it's in my head.
Absolutely.
And I'm going, okay, this isn't cool. So and I think it's great because, and I mean, I've seen it with my wife, same thing. When she figured out her medical issues, got that under control, and then started working out all the time, if she takes more than like 2 days off,
Yeah.
I can see it on her face. It starts to eat at her and it starts messing with how she sees herself. But the moment she goes back and gets back at it, it's like that calm comes back. And I know for a fact it does with me.
Sure.
And the thing about it is, I mean, I look at it and I could say the same thing. I mean, you work out every day at the same time. You're going to jits a couple times a week. You're instructing. You're doing all this. You have these things that keep you in that frame.
Right.
And the other part for me is it's like you need that physicality, but you also need to delve into it. You also need some brain activity outside of just, getting rattled around inside my skull kind of deal.
The skull bounce has to
Yeah,
have a
exactly.
relief too. Yeah.
It's one of those that I think, and I know you do this a lot too, but like audiobooks and different podcasts, it's the number of times that you and I have listened to, oh, who am I thinking of? Like Vadi Bokum and listened to Jordan
Peterson. Yep.
Peterson, Huberman Labs, different things like that. These are men that are, as far as I'm concerned, way smarter than I am. But it's amazing the number of times I've seen a title and been like, we'll see what happens, clicked on it, and they start talking about something that affects what's going on. And all of a sudden you start instituting little things and you're going,
Yep.
okay, now I see where this is going to play a part. And the education side of it, if you're educating yourself on these problems, these quote unquote weaknesses on yourself, it's amazing how quickly you start to be able to address them. Yes, you'll have moments where you fail, but as long as you just keep coming back and attacking it again and again and again, eventually you win.
Absolutely.
I mean, it took me how many years to freaking, I would say I went from being someone that drank a lot. I might have one a week. And for somebody like me, I mean,
That was a big step, dude. That was a big
and
step.
you gotta, for people that don't know, literally it was nothing for me to, on a rough week, clean up a handle.
Yep.
And
I remember.
that's not right. That's not freaking right at all. I mean, I was extremely lucky. I never did anything where I got violent or anything like that with it. But at the same time, that's just not right.
No, no, that's not healthy. Your liver doesn't like that.
No, no, no. Neither does the rest of you. You're in a brain fog all the time. You just feel like dog crap. And that was self-imposed for various reasons. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's like that was like my last crutch that I had, and I've been dealing with it for an extended period. And I'm really glad that's gone because now I swear to God, if I have more than one, I wake up, I feel like I've been hit by a
I feel
train.
like great. Yeah, dude. You and I were talking about the last time we went to camp. Is everybody's offering us a bunch of beers, and I'm like, if I drink that, I'm going to feel like absolute dog shit tomorrow morning. If I drink
Oh yeah,
one, I feel every joint, which
yeah.
I'm thankful for. I mean, I like beer, always have, but it does not like me at my age anymore, and I
Mm-hmm.
have absolutely no problem with that. But I think we all have our vices. Like you at times would use alcohol to kind of shut your brain off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
in my family, we're a big Italian family. We did it with food.
Mm-hmm.
And food, we all know right now, sugar. Big Italian family got pasta, bread, sugar, all that stuff. We do it with food. We sit down, have a good meal. We feel bad. We have a good meal.
Mm-hmm.
That hangs around with you,
Mm-hmm.
literally for a while. So
Oh, I get that, dude. You remember I married into one. I
yeah,
married
yeah,
into
man.
that Italian family.
So I guess what I've had to do is kind of figure out what's causing it. What are the thoughts in my head that, and this is something that I came to realize, and I'm just starting to now realize that not a lot of people do understand. And part of this came from Peterson as well. Just like the verification of it came from Peterson, but in at least the way I look at it, and people in the comments probably going to give me shit about it, but whatever. The there's one voice in your head. Some people more than five, but at least in my head, I've got one voice that's like the absolute best I can possibly be. Right?
Mhm.
Call it conscience, call it God, whatever you want to call it. And then you've got that other voice, which is usually louder and way more repetitive. Telling me, what I can't do, how much we've messed up, and things like, and that type of direction. And what I've noticed is the more the more we become physical, the less toxic things I put in my body, the louder, the better voice becomes. You follow what I'm saying?
100%, because I think it is easier. It is easier, I think, especially for men. And I can only speak on that because I'm a man, not a
I'm a
woman.
man. Yep. Yeah.
And pretty much every successful person I know, every successful man I know, they operate a lot of the same way. And what that is, it's like you are able to, when you can physically see a change or a difference, it's you react to it differently, and then it changes the mental side of it, if that makes sense. It's one of those that you can play the mental game and fight to try to do something and change something inside your head for a long period of time. And unless you can see something physically manifest, it can be a hard
Yeah. We
thing to
need.
keep doing when you're failing quite a bit, which you're
Sure.
going to. It's just, and that's the reality of
Yeah.
it. But when you can sit there and let's say just bench press, okay? Basic bench press. And I bet you $20 you can remember there was times when you were doing this and you did like your personal best. That one day you're like, there's no way I'm going to bench over whatever amount. And then all of a sudden that day you break it. The whole rest of the week, the whole rest of the month, you're on freaking,
Oh
you're
yeah.
not even touching earth. You're walking in the clouds, man. You're
Oh
just,
yeah.
but it's like what people don't realize is that also that boosts the brain capacity and the mental capacity to another level. It's the one thing I've always done, and I've liked to do. And that's why I've always liked the different hobbies that I have and stuff like that too, because now they're physical. You're actually doing something with your hands, with your fingers, everything else. You're doing it. But when all of a sudden you can do something and create something, all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, I did that. That's one more thing. And each time you have a win like that, it's another positive deal for your brain. So it's actually, as far as I'm concerned, it all links together and makes it easier to make changes on the mental side of things and on the emotional side of things. And it allows you to, yes, it may not be directly tied in, but each time you see that physical change, I think you see an emotional change too, or a mental change too.
Yeah. It's a positive. You're reinforcing your own positive actions.
Yeah. And it's one of those that the thing that I see that really bothers me, I would say there's two big things that really irritate me with the way that things are being done right now. And it's one of those things that we don't allow children to fail.
Right. Yeah. Or we punish them so profusely that
Yeah.
they become extremely afraid of failing.
And it's like one extreme or the other. There's no good, happy
Right.
middle ground. And I wished I'd printed it off for this, and I totally forgot. And that's what happens when you work nights and you forget stuff.
And you're old.
Yeah, that too. It's one of those that I saw a thing and it was like, these are the 5 phrases we should stop telling boys. And the first 4 out of the 5, I went, you're turning this around in a really weird direction. And the last
Right.
one, it was like, okay, that is not the phrase itself that was bad. It was the idea of what people are saying along with it and how they're acting as parents along with it.
Sure.
And the one thing that gets me, especially with boys, is they're either not allowed to fail, they're punished for it, or if they get to a certain point and they're seen as a lost cause and everybody just gives the fuck up on
Yeah.
them. And one of the things that I thought, and I did it with both son and daughter, was I need help with this. No, you got to work through this, figure it out. I'm not going to hold your hand. You can ask for some advice. I might give you a little hint, something like this, but you got to figure it out
Right.
because there's something that goes along with that. And that once you start to realize, hey, I can do this, I can think critically, I can do all this stuff, I think it just helps build good mental health with them anyway.
Well, that, and
It,
you're gonna build that quality. You're gonna build that
and
quality that you can't quit until you've figured it out.
yeah, and listen, you fail, so be it. Keep going. Keep failing.
Right.
We demonize failure. We say it's a bad thing. We do everything else, and that was, I think, part of my problem is because I sat there. I remember, I don't know how many times. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not good. No,
Yeah.
no,
That,
no, no,
that,
no.
yep.
It has nothing to do with it. You failed. Okay, so you figured out what doesn't work. Let's try something else.
Exactly. Exactly. I think there's definitely a need to reframe it. I see it on the master and kids class. Kids are just, they'll, I'll show them something once. And there's a couple of them. I'll show them something once and they'll try it and not get it and almost come to tears right in front of me. They didn't
Mhm.
get it right the first time. And I'm like, you're here to practice, bud. You're not here to show off for anybody. You're here to practice. And we just gave out some stripes last week and there's two boys there that I can remember when they first got to class, they were completely down that they couldn't do a couple of things that I showed them, but they just striped up because they demonstrated that after persevering, after keeping coming to class, after failing and failing and failing, that it was just front rolls, shrimps, things like that. But it was the biggest confidence boost. Like, and I asked them both after we striped them up, I was like, you ready to learn something new? And they're like, hell yeah. I mean, they didn't say hell yeah, but they're like, yeah. They're like, yeah, coach. Yeah. Yeah. So I think you hit it right on the head. It's not about failing. It's about not stopping trying to not fail.
Well,
Not,
well,
just
yeah,
don't stop trying.
it's that mentality of one foot in front of the other.
Right.
I'll quit tomorrow.
Sure.
And that's where I think the physicality comes in. And it's like that's one of the things that got me was it's like I never had a problem. I remember doing ruck marches and all kinds of other stuff, and it's like you get to the point you are just dead on your feet. You don't know, and you're just like, okay, all I have to do is put my right foot in front of my left, and you do that left foot in front of my right, and that's just one more step, one more step, one more step, one more step, and it's you're doing that in the physical side of it, and then you start realizing that you start doing it on the mental side of it.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, it's like you're making gains and you never worked at training yourself mentally, or so you thought, but you are.
Yes.
And we have taken that away from a lot of kids and especially boys because boys, when they're young, they have a lot of energy. They don't want to sit still. It takes a lot to teach discipline to them at that age, and that's where I think that physicality needs to come in. You need to work them till they're tired,
That's it. Work them. That's it. You hit it right
and
on. I was
then
just
say,
going to
okay,
say it.
now sit down.
Yep.
Now we're going to do this. Now we're going to take care of this. I always worked better. I mean, and I think you would say the same thing. The number of times we freaking trained our asses off, and afterwards you go back to work or whatever, and you're like, I'm exhausted, but you're all of a sudden you're doing stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, I couldn't figure this out freaking two
Exactly.
hours ago, and now I got it. What the hell was I missing?
Yeah, that's why I love doing jujitsu. I'd gas myself out on work, go to jujitsu, come back, and my body's done, but my
Mm-hmm.
brain's fresh. And that's a
Oh,
lot of
100%.
people don't understand that. And I think one of the things I think you and I both would highly recommend to anybody listening is go to jits. Find a good gym in your area, and you're not going to get a better workout. And if you're in a gym with some older guys, don't go to I wouldn't personally go to a competition gym. I'd go to a hobby gym
No.
because competition, your body can't take that at least at my age. I can, I don't want to, but,
Listen, the
um,
only time I want to deal with that kind of crap if it's at one time, hey, I got to fight
just,
now, and that's it.
yeah, yep, yep.
It's
It's that Toby Keith song, right? I'm not as
yeah,
good as I once was, but I'm good once as I ever was.
never was. But I mean, dude, think about it. And I'm 100% for jits, you know that, but it's one of those that listen, if get into boxing,
You're boxing
kickboxing,
too, yeah.
freaking
Muay
make
Thai,
sure
anything like
if you're not hitting weights, you're doing some sort of exercise. Go run, go bike, go do something
that.
to shut your brain off. Physical training is huge. Even if hey, I don't want to go to a gym, which I understand. I hate going to public gyms. I hate them. And
Well,
that's why I
there's no the
built my,
bathrooms.
and that's why I built my own.
That's. I was going to Planet Fitness until the girls went in the boys and the boys went in the
Oh,
girls. I
shit.
was like,
let's
all right,
let's
I'm
not go
out.
into that right now. Let's not do that right now. I'm in a good spot. Okay. Anyway,
Go to your happy place.
I talked to one of my guys at work, and he's money's a little tight. He went through a divorce not too long ago, And he's sitting there and he's like, well, what do I do? And I turned him on to, what was it? Brute force, the sandbags that I got.
There you go. Yeah.
I said, listen, get a set of these. They have workouts that they put out with them, everything else. I go watch around like Memorial Day, Labor Day, Veterans Day, stuff like that. They have all kinds of sales or because it's a prior military run it, I think. And around Christmas, they have sales. Well, he ended up getting a set and he's been doing that. And he's like, that it was a lifesaver. I'm not paying for a gym membership. I'm not doing all that, but minimum, like every day that he's not at work, he's working out. And at least 1 out of 2 days that he's at work, he's working out because we work a funky schedule. And he's doing this and he goes, that was huge.
Yeah.
So you need that physicality. My father laughs at me a little bit because I'll have a week. I'll be working out, but I'll have a week and he's doing something stupid. But he's like, you still, at 40 something years old, still look forward to coming over and putting in hay, even though you say hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, because you actually see something getting done. You're accomplishing something, but you don't have to
And
think. It's
you
easy to
shut
put
your
in,
brain
hey, look,
off.
you've done it a
Yeah.
couple times.
Yep.
And it is very physically demanding. I mean, it beats the crap out of you.
Yep.
But yeah, I wake up next morning, I'm sore. There's muscles I haven't used in a while or had to do certain ways. And anybody that's done farm work knows that you crawl around inside of a haymow. It's not like walking on concrete. It sucks. But at the same time, you feel better. So and I know I probably sound like a broken record at this point when I keep saying it, but it's super, super important. There's no other way for it.
Yeah. And if you have kids and you have young boys, they got to see you doing that.
Oh,
They really,
100%. You lead by example. I
I
mean, my
didn't, I
father
didn't,
didn't stop going 90 miles an hour until he had a freaking heart bypass freaking last December.
yeah. And now he's only going 94.
Well, I right now I think he's back up to 80. He's
Yes.
freaking
Your
he's
dad's a
been
beast.
he's been attacking all kinds of projects that don't require any heavy
Yeah.
lifting, and he's just been getting after it. I mean, they had a gravel driveway put in, and my mother was chasing him around trying to take the rake out of his hand because he felt the need to go out and rake freaking stone. It's, but that's part of it too. Is you know, you look at, and I can say this, knowing you and knowing your parents and everything else, your father was a businessman his entire life. And he was constantly thinking about that stuff, constantly doing that. And it's like you see the same thing in you. When you get something like that, you just go with it, and it's going. And so it's an attribute. When you're younger, you may look at it and say, well, that's not a great attribute. But when you get older and you get a little bit more mature, all of a sudden you realize, hey, I can make this work in my favor.
Yeah. Yeah. You can definitely use that type of attitude to overcome obstacles for sure. And I guess part of, so we've got the physical part where we try to clear our minds, when it has become overwhelmed with bullshit, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
And go ahead. Sorry.
and so I guess the other thing that has helped me a lot is tremendously is figuring out what needs to be put into my mind. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
you and I both, we don't watch a lot of news. We don't watch a lot of TV period. I know I watch the occasional movie, but that's just because, I'm a dude. I like to see some blow 'em up, shoot 'em up things, but
Mm-hmm.
the drama, things like that, TV shows, things like that. I don't do a lot of listening to, and I don't listen to a lot of radio. I started probably just after college. I started. I heard one of my sales mentors talked about your university on wheels, where if you're in the car, you're listening to something that is going to teach you something or make you mentally tougher, but you're
Mm-hmm.
feeding your mind on a constant basis what it needs to become better,
Oh yeah.
um, and not listen to the bullshit that's bringing you down. So I think part of what I realized is the more that I fed my mind uh, uplifting, improving, and I'm not talking about those kind of self-help builds where it's I'm positive, you're a beautiful person, you should,
That's
you
part of
should.
the other problem with fucking boys today is that bullshit. They can't have
Yeah,
negative thought.
the fluffy bullshit where you can believe you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want, you can have anything. I'm
Oh my
talking about
god.
the hardcore stuff, like Jordan Peterson's, 12 Rules for Life, and
Yep.
Goggins. I got his book on tape,
Yep.
and several others, and plus the other class. One thing that I delved into was religion. I was brought up
Mm-hmm.
12 years Catholic, but I also read the Bhagavad Gita and the Book of the Five Rings and
Hmm.
Buddhist texts. And through that study, I came to realize that there's principles to life. And I don't want to get into that because I want to save that to another podcast. But the time you won't believe, for anybody listening, you won't believe the time that the books that you can go through if
Hmm.
you just switch out the radio in the car and just
100%.
throw a book on.
100%.
And the more you read, the more you listen, the faster you can listen. So right now I'm up to 1.7, and I'll be able to knock out a book 3 times, one book a week, but I've listened to it 3 times by the time we're done,
Hmm.
right? So, we've listened to a lot of books. I think you've listened, I've listened, I've got friends that I turned on to it, but if you can fill your mind, if you can eliminate the toxins, food, alcohol, whatever it is, you can make sure your mind's clear. If you exercise, you can make sure your mind's empty, and then you fill it up with your university on wheels and wherever you can. And I used to listen to real heavy metal when we were powerlifting, but now I can listen to Jordan Peterson while I'm while I'm lifting, and I think it's great. I'm listening to his Exodus lectures right now, and I think it's great. People think I'm nuts, but
Okay. Well, I guess I'm not alone then, because I was actually listening to Huberman the other day when I was
there
freaking
you go.
lifting.
I don't. Yeah. So I can I can still lift heavy, but I don't need to be amped up. I can
Yeah.
be filling my brain while I'm emptying at the same time. So
Hmm.
I think as far as tools, anybody listening, I consider myself an average guy. That's how I've improved myself, kept myself sane through the trials that I've had. And I don't want to say that my trials are bigger than anybody else's trials. Everybody's got their own bag of shit to deal with.
Oh yeah.
And
100%.
to you, your bag of shit is the biggest deal that you're gonna have to deal with, and mine is gonna be the biggest deal that I'm gonna have to deal with. I'm not
And
judging everybody. I'm just saying, here's some
the
tools
other
that help
thing,
me.
the other thing people got to realize too, it's like the trials. You and I have both gone through different things, like you said, but it's one of those two where people have to understand that what you may watch me go through something and be like, oh, he's just freaking, it's not a big deal. Or you watch me
Yeah.
go through something and be like, holy crap, it wrecked him. It did all this stuff. Everything affects everybody differently.
Yep.
And I know in my case, I went from being a very empathetic young man to someone now. I just look at things and I'm like, okay, oh well. Anybody
Yeah.
dead? Nope, then I don't care.
It was dead,
And
bleeding, nothing, nowhere.
it's in to a certain extent that's not good.
It's got
It,
its place. It's
it
got
does
its
have its
place.
place, but
You've
at the
seen where
same
that
time,
place is.
and that's required growth too. It's required things.
Right.
It's just being cognizant of the others around you, because it's the one thing that I've sat there and I've worked really hard with my son on, is the fact that it's like, and I would see him dealing with something, and I know somewhat what he's going through because I went through something similar, so to speak.
Sure.
And we would have a conversation about it. I'd be like, listen, this is what worked for me. I'm not going to say it's going to work for you. Try it.
Yep.
And the number of times he's fought against it because, no, I'm going to do it my way. And he's ended up coming back and saying, well, you were right. But at the same time, I realize it is affecting him differently because of various things.
Yeah.
So I've had to step back and say, okay, I have to reserve judgment on some of this stuff.
Sure.
I can't put him in my shoes. I can't be in his shoes. So that's one of the hard things. It's like, if you are not, you and I have talked numerous times and we've compared stories on various things. And it's like, you tell me something. I'm like, okay, that's not a big deal. Well, jackass, guess what? I wasn't in your shoes. I don't know how big of a deal it was.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. And I'm pretty sure there's some things you'd look at me and go, okay, that's not a big deal. Well, guess what? You weren't there.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't, in my mind at the time when you're telling me, it wasn't the bomb going off in my head at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've, just like you, I've had to learn that. Like I said, my mother tells me I'm empathetic, but I've learned over the years that just when somebody tells me something, when you tell me something, when my wife tells me something, I've had to learn that, it, you're not necessarily asking for my opinion on what went on in your life. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
to give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to be heard. My wife, I definitely know my wife wants to be heard, and my ass needs to just shut up and nod my head.
Yeah, I got to learn to shut up too. Hey, let me ask you this while we're on this
Yeah.
subject. we've both had our moments where we've had our little revelations, whatever, and we've thought about this.
Yeah,
One of the things I'm going to say is, and I'm curious if this happened to you, that it was during some of these times, especially when I was still having, like, I'll call it some anger issues, if you will, where I learned that I could be alone and I could function almost better alone than I could with people around me. And it was after that, as I would hit certain issues in life, that I started figuring out who my really true friends were. And when I would find those moments and I knew those true friends, those would be the few people that when I was hitting a rough patch, when I was hitting whatever, having a mental breakdown or having a mental hitting a mental roadblock, those were the people that I could reach out to and freaking bounce ideas or vent or whatever.
absolutely, absolutely.
And that, like, going back to, with that being said, going back to now children not being allowed to fail and everything else on those lines, part of that is, it's like that was the one thing that always irritated me in school is, yes, you have to learn to work together in groups and everything else. And a big one for sports for teaching that, and, teamwork and all everything else. But we also don't, I don't think we allow, especially young men, to realize, hey, you got to be able to function on your own. You have to be able to work through this on your own. You might be able to go and ask for help for like one section, but you still got to get this main project done by yourself.
And I gotta agree with you there, and I think one thing I would add is I've always been a loner. Like I've never had, before I think high school I didn't really have a lot of friends, but I never thought that was weird. I will say that, there was certain relationships that I had, one particular relationship that I had in college, that I attached my acceptance of myself or joy with myself to another person's opinion of me. I'll just say it was my girlfriend at the time. So when I kind of gave up my self confidence because I attached, when she approved and she was happy, I was happy. And when we break up, that kind of devastated me. Right. So I remember thinking back, I never had this problem. I used to go to movies alone, just, and, I understand what you're saying, be able to do things on your own. I'm saying be comfortable alone. Be
Yeah.
comfortable with yourself alone. Be happy with yourself alone. Never. And I remember, I think it was, a priest, because I used to have a priest in college and high school that I would talk to. And I asked him about it, and basically what he said is you need to be comfortable alone. You're never going to find happiness in somebody. You're never going to never attach your happiness to somebody else, because one person's happiness is hard enough to achieve. Two people's happiness from one person is impossible.
Yeah.
So
100%.
that was a hard lesson. So I would totally agree with you. You have to be able to do stuff and fend for yourself on your own, and you have to be comfortable enough with yourself, because
Mm-hmm.
I think if one of your goals is to find a wife and get married and have a family, is you're never going to find the right one if you're looking for the one that's going to make you happy.
Oh, 100%.
You want to find the one that you want to share your life with. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
I love my wife to death, but I can do pretty much. I want to share the rest of my life with my wife, because I choose to, not because I have to. That if that makes sense.
That to me makes 100, that makes perfect sense. It's one of those, my wife and I've had that discussion where it's, you might not necessarily quote unquote need each other just for, let's say, survival. Okay. But the life you want, you need to find that other half to complete the puzzle, so to speak.
Right. Exactly. And it's a daily choice.
Oh, 100%. And it's also one of those where, and like in the last podcast, one of the things we mentioned was the fact, for a good marriage, you focus on the other person. Okay. But at the same time, you can never stop focusing on yourself. You need to take those times to focus on yourself. Now There will be moments through the day where, yes, you put that other person ahead of you. But like I said, moments through the day, different times, different things, we're going to do this. I'll put my wife's wants and needs ahead of my own in this situation, whatever that situation may be. And I think that's important. But again, I cannot physically put those her wants and needs ahead of my own if I can't take care of myself to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You're not looking to her to make the perfect mat. You're looking for the mat to
I'm
make
looking
a
for the
life with
perfect
her.
us.
Yeah. Yep.
I want the perfect us, but that means, and the only way I can bring the quote unquote perfect me to the picture is if I've built it.
Yep.
She's going to have to work on her, but together we make the perfect us.
And I think to your point before, the better you are as a person, the better people you're going to attract, which is always going to be a small circle.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've noticed, and you chime in on this, if you look at people that are successful, that freaking are, and my favorite is not just successful, but the people that literally consider themselves happy, and they look forward to the next day. They freaking, they're happy in life. They don't have a lot of friends.
No. No.
They
Yep.
will tell you, yeah, I know a lot of people. I have a lot of acquaintances. They may use the word friend for acquaintances, but if you were to sit down and actually have them break it down, their confidants, the people they talk to all the time, the ones that they deal with all the time, the ones that they could call up in the middle of the night and say, hey, I need your help, it's a handful.
Right. Exactly.
I
And
mean, when it
trying.
comes down to it, I think I can count mine on one hand that aren't blood related to me. And even that amounts to my mom and dad.
Yep.
But other than
Same here,
that,
man.
well, correction on that because I would count my wife in there, but that's one of those where we're married. That's a whole different ballgame. But no, I mean, and I look at those people that I know, and I mean, some of them, I can sit there and I can look at you and say, you're one of my very close friends.
Same here.
And but if I were to step back and take myself out of the picture, I know you have a group that's very small. You look at me, same thing. And we look at other people we know. We might know them and talk to them. They're successful people. They're everything else. But you look at them, we're not in their friend group, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
It's friggin' tight.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. And
Yeah.
that's the other thing that I think is a problem. You see, do they allow that in school? No. They get all pissy over it and they get everything else. These kids have to work through a lot of this shit on their own in school, but we've taken it out to where everybody's the same. Everybody gets a freaking trophy. Everybody freaking, oh my
Yeah. What's
God.
fair? What's fair?
Yeah.
Everything's got to be
Let's ain't
fair.
fucking fair.
Yeah. Nothing's fair. So, but I think we've gone over quite a
Sidetrack.
bit here today, brother. I
Yeah.
think
Got
I
a little
think we hit.
sidetracked.
No. I mean, I think it's all to the good because one thing that I wanted to hit on this podcast is just we've both had our low points. We both realized that what we put into our body definitely affects what we think about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we've definitely taken steps. You've seen me do it. I've seen you do it to better what we put into our body, whether it's food, whether it's not drinking, whether it's not eating like a madman, the exercise, at my age, I've seen, you know, the cathartic nature of the exercise and just clearing
Mm-hmm.
my head to help me. And then, filling our heads with useful information versus what society would have us put in there. So I think that my message to anybody today would be, model somebody, find somebody that you find somebody in your life. If you don't have the father figures that we had or the parents that we had, find somebody in your life that you can model and consume what they consume, as far as, literature or work out the way they work out. Just try, if you've never had someone give you a direction like that, just, find somebody in your life that you can model and just
I
start
would,
and then, and feel better.
yeah, I would agree with that 100%. One little thing I would add is this. Also, don't be afraid to take a little time every once in a while to separate yourself out.
For sure.
And I mean, I look at it like this I finally have gotten you back into a little bit more of getting out in the woods more and stuff like that. And it's you and I both know, and I stepped away from it for way too long. And it's one of those that I love hunting and fishing and trapping to the point that I do because I know that you'll go out there and the number of times I've come back freezing cold, soaked to the bone, whatever else. And it's almost like working
You
out.
feel
It's a reset.
alive.
It's a freaking reset. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I needed that.
Yeah.
But, and the other thing I'm also going to say too, another thing is we delved into the religion thing a little bit too. I think that's a huge thing, and helping people gives you a base to go off of. And you know what? You might not think that you're getting a direct answer, but the number of times reached out to try to talk to God and say, hey, I need help. Give me some guidance. And some people will call it weird. I call it, just how it is. You get an answer, but you got to be willing to look for it and accept it no matter where it's coming from, because it may not come from where you think it's going
Absolutely. You gotta be open to it. I
to.
completely agree with
And
you there.
when that happens and you start to realize that that's what's happening, you're getting these answers and you're getting this stuff. And I'm pretty sure there were a couple of times in my case that included a punch to the face, but I needed it. And it was one of those where it was, you had that, and when I realized that what was happening, I was so, so thankful. And take that how you'd like it, but that's something I think is huge.
I think you're right, and I think that's a whole
And
nother
that's something I
podcast.
think we should probably delve into one of these days, is talking a little bit about religion in men's lives.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be done. And I'm not saying you need to pick a particular one necessarily, because like you and I have talked numerous times, we are both I'd say we were both Christian men, but we were brought up in different avenues of it.
Yes, and that's I
But
definitely
overall,
that'll be
our
a
base,
couple podcasts for
yeah,
sure.
but overall, our basics, how we look at things, how we do things is the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah, it's Christianity. Yeah.
So I think I think that's a huge thing. So
It is.
that,
It
I'm
is.
done diving down rabbit holes. I'm done.
No, you hit it on the head, man. We're just trying to take it in bite size pieces so that we can deliver as much value as we can if anybody thinks there's value in it. So yeah, I think we're good on that one. I always love talking to you, brother.
Oh, 100%,
Think
dude. Anytime we get a chance to chat and go from there. And speaking of which, we got to figure out this next coming weekend, because hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be out chasing turkeys and getting that done here
Yeah,
soon.
maybe we
So
should put some of that on the YouTube channel. That would be
I'm game,
hilarious.
dude.
All
Let's
right,
hook up some GoPros and let's do it.
all
I
right,
don't care.
let's do it. I'm
I will
game.
embarrass myself in front of everybody.
Absolutely. This is how average guys hunt
Make asses out of
turkeys.
themselves.
Awesome. All right, man.
All right,
Sounds
brother. It was good chatting with you. Everybody out there, don't forget, please don't forget. It may seem like the odds are stacked against us. See, I can't even talk.
you're
The
good.
odds are stacked against us, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Remember, you are not alone in this fight.
Roger that.
And my mouse just disappeared.
I'll edit that up.